The self from the different perspective of psychology.
These are the objectives of our report. Listeners and watchers must: first, identify the different ideas of self-understanding. Second, can determine the difference between ideal and natural self. Third, identify the truth and false of self in the field of psychology. And lastly, understand the definition of self based on psychological aspects. Good day everyone, these are the members of Group 5 and its reports. For myself, or I self, is Miss Giselle Daniega. For Global versus Differentiation Models are Mr. John Marlo Claro and Mr. John Monteral. And for the Real and Ideal Self, that's me, Mr. Noriel Cabalin. For Multiple versus Unified Self is Mr. Arvin Gabriel Duran. And for True versus False Self is Mr. Mark Fabo Cabellon. And lastly, but not the least, the self as proactive and agentic are Mr. Jonathan Camilon and Mr. June Michael Gumunid.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, classmate. My name is Giselle Ana Diniega. I'm here today to discuss the definition of me, self, and I, self. Right now, I'm going to present to you the one of the self-embarrassed perspective of psychology, which is the concept of William James called I, self, and me, self. Almost 330 years ago, James 1890 introduced the distinction between me and I to debate about the self. By the way, according to William James, the self was actually divided into two categories, which is called the I self and the me self. So, the I self, by the way, is also called or being related as a thinking self, or it is the one reflecting our soul or a person's mind. And also, the I self was being characterized to have intuitive or being able to design things or the individual to come up particular decision. So, this time, we will talk about the me self. Me self is being said to be empirical self, which means it refers to a person's individual experience. And according to William James, the me self was divided into some categories. The first one is material self. According to William James, it pertains to be object, places, or even people which have the label mind. Such positions are viewed as extension of individual identities. For instance, your clothes reflect certain aspect for your personality and you designated them as my wardrobe. Second is the social self. Social self is the multifaceted analysis of the self concept based on the social nature of the self. It refers to who a person is, or he can act a social situation like a relation, or to make a relationship with the environment, or he can communicate with the surroundings. And the last one is spiritual self. Your spiritual self is you in your most beautiful and powerful form. It is the authentic self, the unconditional part, the you without pattern. Spiritual self was actually being referred to the most intimate or important part of the self that includes persons or purpose and the core value and the behavior. The goal of this paper is to take step back from the cognitive science and to take a closer look from the conceptual distinction between me and I. In the context of consciousness, I will suggest the following James 1890 in the opposition to the tradition started by Wittgenstein 1958 that the context me, the self as object, reflects the phenomenology of selfhood and corresponds to what is also known as sense of self, self-consciousness, and phenomenal selfhood. On the other hand, the ultimate meaning of I, the self as subject, is rooted the metaphysics of subjective. Example: I see me in the mirror. The I is the subject and the me is the object. We're like islands in the sea, separate on the surface but connected in the deep. By William James. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is John Marlo Monternel, and I am going to report about global versus differentiated models. But my topic is only global model. Let's proceed. Who is Murray Bowen? Murray Bowen was an American psychiatrist and a professor in psychiatry at Georgetown University. Bowen was among the pioneers of family therapy and noted the founder of Semitic therapy beginning in 1950s. He developed a systems theory of family. So what is differentiation and fusion? Differentiation and fusion refers to the extent in which an individual can separate the emotional and intellectual selves. The solid self, the differentiated self, is characterized as pseudo self. So when they say differentiation of self is the ability to separate feelings and thoughts, so what does it mean by undifferentiated people? It's just the opposite and cannot separate feelings and thoughts. So what is fused self? Fused self is characterized as a total self concept, views the self as multiple cognitive structure and it's integrated into one single view of the self total self concept. I'll give you an example. For example, the verbal measure of identity fusion taps feelings or reciprocal strength between the individual and the group, like I am strong because of my group. I would do more for my group than any group members would do. As well, feelings of oneness with the group. I am one with my group. Global self-esteem. From the theory Shivelson, Havner, Stanton said that the global self refers to the extent to which one's perception of the self is clearly and consistently defined. So, it means it is a personality variable that represents the way people generally feel about themselves. And they said that global self-esteem is a decision people can make their own worth as a person, so it can be high, or some prefer the term healthy, but rather in a specific situation or in a relation to a specific activity. I give you an example. For example, Mike may have a high overall self-esteem and have a positive view of himself as a singer and yet low self-esteem about communicating in a second language. And I give you another example. Individuals with high self-esteem are happier than those with low self-esteem, because with the higher self-esteem, you are more productive and active of yourself. Now, high self-esteem in childhood is linked to a variety of positive adjustment outcomes, including school success, good relationship with parents and peers, and less anxiety and depression. That's all. Thank you. And let's proceed to the next reporter.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Marlo Claro, and I will discuss all about differentiated self. Differentiated self, it refers to your ability to separate your own feelings and thoughts from others. For example, you have empathy to your friend or to other people, like that. Definition of self is a psychological state of being in which someone is able to maintain their sense of itself, identity, thoughts, and emotions, whether emotionally or physically close with others, particularly within intense or intimate relationships. We have 10 differentiated models of self. The first one is self-consciousness. The self-consciousness is a heightened sense of self-awareness. And number 2, self-multiple. Self-multiple is someone whose role is not stopped to being her, him, his, her responsibility and sense of self. And number 3 is self-looking glass. Self-looking glass refers to other people serve as a mirror in which we can see ourselves. And number 4 is a self as structure. Self as a structure is the self as the which can be an objective to itself. It's essentially a social structure and resists experience. And number 5 is self as flower. Self as flower, the self is in this view is like a flower potentially growing into a full bloom. And number 6 is self as creative. Self as creative is a man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. And number 7 is self as owner. Self as owner is this model indicated by the chance place hidden depths and reflects the notion that own may not really know someone. And number 8 is a self as identity. Self as an identity is our self concept is our identity. And number 9 is self as unicorn. Self as unicorn, and it is a part of unknown, even unknowable, because it is so below consciousness and progress. And number 10 is a self as chameleon. Self as chameleon is because of it is a multiple, mutable, adaptable, and selected in consideration. And the objective of this topic is the ability is separate one's feeling from thoughts, the ability to maintain one's feeling and thought is the presence and pressure of close, intimate relationships. And that's all.
Hello there, classmates. Today I'm going to report to you about the ideal self and the actual self. By the way, I'm Miguel Cabali, your reporter. Do you know that in psychology, ideal self and actual self are terms used to describe personality domains? Now, these personality domains of psychology is concerned on how we act, we feel, the thoughts, the beliefs, and the goals are constructed, and how these psychological factors in turn. So self-concept. Self-concept is an idea of the self constructed from the belief on hold about oneself and the response of others. So self-concept is somehow related to self-image, because self-image means that it is one ability's appearance and personalities. And in self-concept, it holds about oneself and the response of others. So when we are talking to someone, or when we are showing our feelings or actions to someone, we are just giving them the truth, the reality on who we are, right? So below this, the self-concept, we have the actual self and the ideal self. So, a little background for actual self. The term actual self was introduced by Torrey Higgins in 1987 as a part of his self-discrepancy theory. According to him, actual self is a cognitive structure that contains all attributes that a person believes that are self-descriptive. So speaking of actual self, the concept of actual self is self-image of what a person is now. So say for example, if I believe that I am cute and handsome, then cuteness and handsome is part of myself. And another example, if my colleagues describes me that I am cute and handsome, then therefore those attributes contained into my actual self. Does everybody get that? Okay, so let's proceed. So let's go down to actual self and the ideal self. So actual self is referring to who you really are, or the actual you. The actual self, the normal you. You're just telling that you're just being you, the original. So say for example, I'm Noriel, I'm a student of UC. I'm a Catholic and a religious one. I'm a good, like that. Just being original and not a fake one. And the ideal self is referring to who or what you are trying to be. So say for example, you have an idol. Example, James Reid. There's something on James Reid that you admire him, and something that you wanted to be like him. The idea of being futuristic on why you idolize him, that's the point there of ideal self. Something that doesn't exist on you that you wanted to have someday or somehow. Gets? So let's proceed. Do you know Carl Rogers? Or what is it on Carl Rogers that he is important and remembered in the field of psychology? So Carl Rogers is a psychologist and believed that every person could achieve their goals, wishes, and desires in life. Why? Because according to him, for a person to grow, they need an environment that provides them genuineness, acceptance, and empathy. So for him, without these relationships and healthy personalities, a person will not develop as they should. Just like a tree, it will never grow without sunlight and water. Same as the person. A person will not grow without love, empathy, genuineness, and acceptance. So to sum up my report, ideal and actual self is self-concept or the self-image. So for actual self, it's the self that you have right now. Everything that you have right now. The thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, your actions, your personality, everything. That is actual self. And for ideal self, is something that you don't have and you wanted to have or you wanted to become. That is ideal self. So again, I am Noriel Cabalhin, your reporter for ideal and actual self.
Good day, sir. Good day, classmates. I'm Ervin Gabriel Diduran. I'm here to present my topic about multiple and unified self. So, do you know what a multiple and unified self is? No? Then let me tell you the definition of multiple and unified self and my understanding about this topic. So, let's begin. So, on the right side of your screen, you can see an image of a man. This man is David Lester. David Lester is the developer of the multiple and unified self theory. A little background about David Lester is he is a British-American psychologist, suicidologist, and a professor at Stockton University. So in his theory, he stated that to understand the self is to understand first the concept of multiple and unified self. So what does this mean? So he stated that to understand the self, yourself, to understand your identity, to understand who you really are, is to first understand the concept of multiple and unified self. So multiple self is a concept of the self as composed of many different selves stated with different affective, perceptual, and cognitive features. So what does this mean? So multiple self is a many different self state. So you have different personas. You have a different sets of identities. So for example, me as a Gab as a student, Gab as a brother, Gab as a son, Gab as a friend. So I have multiple personas, multiple identities. So this is the definition of multiple self. So coping with different selves constitutes a formidable task among adolescents. These challenges contributes heavily to a young person's struggles for a unified self. So this is the problem about multiple self. Because of the multiple personas that you have, it introduces what we so-called identity crisis. What does identity crisis mean? So identity crisis is when you are having hard time figuring out your identity. So as stated earlier, for me example, is me as a student, me as a friend, me as a brother, me as a son. I have different identities. Because of these different identities, I am having a identity crisis. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out who I really am. So this is the problem about multiple self. As an adolescent, you're trying to figure out your concept of yourself as you develop, as you grow. So, but then again, because of your different personas, your different identities, you are having a hard time trying to figure out your real persona. You are having a hard time trying to build up yourself. That's it. So, in unified self, it means referring to the composite persona or the self that contains all of the other personas. So what this means is that the unified self is you as a whole. So you have finally found who you are. So earlier I stated that in multiple self, I have many different identities. Me as a student, me as a friend, me as a brother, me as a son. So in unified self, I have finally figured out where I belong in those identities, what my identity is, what my persona is. So that's the definition of unified self. I have finally figured out who I really want to be, who I want to be. Myself, I figured out myself. So in conclusion, for me, multiple self is just a developing stage of a man. As he develops his different identities, he develops multiple identities. He creates different identities over the years of his adolescent life, and the result of that development is the unified self. So the unified self is the real you, the real identity, the real persona, yourself, what you have become. So that's all for me today. Again, I'm Ervin Gabriel Didoran. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark Febo Cablion. Today, I'm gonna show you and explain to you what is false and true self. One of the most powerful and surprising explanation for why we may as adults be in trouble mentally is that in our earliest years we denied the opportunity to be ourselves. That is, we were not allowed to be willful and difficult, or be demanding, aggressive, intolerant, and unrestrictively selfish as we needed to be. because our caregivers are preoccupied or fragile, we had to be preternaturally attuned for their demands, sensing that we had to comply in order to be loved and tolerated. And as a result, many years later, without quite understanding the process, we risk the feeling unanchored, inwardly dead, and not entirely present. This psychological theory, the true and false self, is the work of one of the most greatest thinkers in 20th century, the English psychoanalyst, the child psychiatrist, Donald Winnicott. Based on Winnicott's close observation with his adult and infant patients, he states that a healthy development inwardly requires us to experience immense life-sustaining luxury of a period where we don't have to bother the feelings and opinions to those people who are tasked in taking care of us. Because those around us for a time adapted themselves entirely to our needs and desires, however inconvenient and arduous it might be. The true self of an infant, in Winnicott's formulation, is by nature asocial and amoral. It isn't interested in the feelings of others and isn't socialized. It screams when it needs to, even if it is in the middle of the night or in a crowded area. It may be aggressive, and in the eyes of a stickler for manners or a lover of hygiene, shocking and a bit disgusting. It just wants to express itself where and how it wants. It may be sweet, of course, on its own term, but not to charm or bargain for love. If a person is to have any sense of feeling real as an adult, then it has to have enjoyed the immense emotional privilege of being able to be true on his and her own way. To disturb people for what it wants, to kick when it is angry, to scream when it is feeling tired, and to bite if it is aggressive. The true self of a child must be granted the imaginative opportunity to destroy the parents while in a rage, and then witnessing the parents survive and enduring, which lends a child a vital and immense reassuring sense that it is not in fact omnipotent, and that the world won't collapse simply because sometimes it wishes or it fears it could. When things go well, gradually and willingly, a child develops a false self, a capacity to behave according to the demands of external reality. This is what enables the child to submit to the rigors of school, and as it develops itself as an adult of working life as well. When we have been given a chance to be ourselves, we do not rebel in every occasion and insist on our every needs. We can follow the rules because we have for a time been able to ignore the entirely. In other words, Winnicott is not a thorough enemy of a false self. He understood its role well enough and simply insisted that it belonged to health only. When it had been preceded by a thorough earlier experience by an untrammeled true self. On Winnicott's findings from his adult and infant patients, during their session, the patients would sometimes scream, steal money from his wallet, or even at one point broke Winnicott's favorite vase. But to Winnicott, however, he just let the patients do what they want in order for them to find their true selves. To sum it all up, true self is a state where a person can wholeheartedly express his actions, where he doesn't give a glimpse of care on what others may think or talk about him or her. on false self, however, is like a mask where you hide your own self or true self in order to blend in to society. And our last presenter is, drumroll please, Jonathan J.R. Pularan and June Michael Gumonit.
Good day, everyone. I'm Jonathan Jr. Puralan Camilon. I will discuss to you the self as proactive and agentic. The topic that assigned to me is proactive. Self as proactive refers to self-initiated action aimed at preventing a problem from occurring. Controlling a situation by making things to happen or by preparing possible future problem. It refers to test change of a situation by making early adjustment rather than adapting to it or waiting for something to happen. Proactive people are always looking ahead at future activities, project, and event, and anticipating needs. For example, if they are attending a conference in a different city, they go beyond actually booking air, arranging ground transportation, and booking rooms. So, what is proactive and reactive person? Proactive person is someone who has developed a certain schedule in their life. They are well organized and persistent. Reactive person is unorganized and instead of approaching tasks in a structured way, they are reacting whatever is urgent in that moment. Characteristic of proactive and reactive people. Proactive people don't blame anyone or anything. Reactive people blame circumstances, conditions, and conditioning. When people blame external things, they are giving away the control of their life, and that's why they always feel out of control. Proactive people behavior is a product of their conscious choice based on values. Reactive people behaviors is a product of their condition based on feelings. When you do something, it's important that you say, I will go for a run because I want to, instead of I will go for run because I have to. Proactive people are still influenced by their external stimulus, but their response is value-based choice. Reactive people build their lives around other emotions. It's important that what you do is your choice rather than impulse. So, be sure that you have a clear goals that you want to achieve. Being reactive means blaming others for choices. It means that you react to situation through your emotion. Here, you can often come across as blaming, resentful, insecure, and anger.
Hello guys, my name is June Michael Ligumulid and I am going to talk about the self as agentic.
Outline. What is agentic? What is self in agentic perspective? And 4 agentic perspectives. The word agentic is described as an individual's power to control his or her own goals, actions, and destiny. It stems from the word agency, which Webster's dictionary defines as the capacity, condition, or state of acting
or of exerting power. The self and agentic perspective. The agentic self is defined as the aspect of human personality that is determined by future assessments of one's goals, objectives, and actions. An agentic perspective emerges on Bandura's socio-cognitive view of personality. He viewed people as agents or originators of experience. Bandura conceived human agency as the ability to act and make things happen. So, these are the 4 agentic perspectives. So first is intentionally. People form intentions that include action plans and strategies for realizing them, which enables us to behave with purpose. Example, I studied last night. Why? Because there is a quiz or an exam. I cooked some hot dogs and eggs. Why? Because I'm hungry. So we do things with purpose. The second agentic perspective is forethought. People set themselves goals and foresee likely outcomes of prospective actions to guide and motivate their efforts anticipatorily. Example, when a person is deciding, that person has his options, and with each options, he has to anticipate outcomes in order for that person decides depending on what might comes out after. So another example is I go out of my house, I look up to the sky, and then I see the dark clouds. So I go back again inside my house and I bring my raincoat with me because I think it's going to rain. The third agentic perspective is self-reactiveness. Agents are not only planners and forethinkers, they are also self-regulators. Example, drinking on a beer house gives a person pleasure, and it will give that person the motivation to drink, yet he will regulate his actions in order for him to get away from self-centered stuff or problems. So another example is, I notice that I'm gaining weight, so I would react that I will do healthy diet and do some exercises. What I'm pointing is that we can react to certain situations and we can be motivated to regulate our own actions. The fourth agentic perspective is self-reflectiveness. People are not only agents, they are also self-examiners of their own functioning. It gives us the ability to reflect on our own thoughts and behavior and make changes as needed. Example, in deciding situation again. When a person chooses one of his options and everything went wrong, that person will reflect and will make changes for the better. Another example is me and my friends are laughing and then I overact and suddenly I slap one of my friends, so I will reflect on my action whether it was wrong or not, and I will apologize to my friend because he or she may be hurt. As Albert Bandura said, humans are producers of their life circumstances, not just products of them. Thank you.
The self from the different perspective of psychology.
Good day everyone, these are the members of Group 5 in its reports. For myself, or I self, is Miss Giselle Daniega. For Global versus Differentiation Models are Mr. John Marlo Claro and Mr. John Monteral. And for the Real and Ideal Self, that's me, Mr. Noriel Cabalin. For Multiple versus Unified Self is Mr. Arvin Gabriel Duran. And for True versus False Self is Mr. Mark Fabo Cabellon. And lastly, but not the least, the self as proactive and agentic are Mr. Jonathan Camilon and Mr. June Michael Gumunit. That's all for the report of Group 5. I hope you've learned something in understanding self and the different aspects of psychology. God bless everyone. God bless UC and MTC.